Welcome to another episode of Taking the Reins. I'm delighted to have with me Candice Bass Robinson. It's just a nice moment to sit down and speak about things when we're sort of in between what was and what's going to be. It's an exciting time where everything starts building up, and we look forward to the atmosphere that comes when all the big races roll in. Candice, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure, Vicky.
It's always nice to start at the beginning. And with you, I know you've got a long history of riding and horses and that, but when it came to you working in the yard, did you always want to train?
Well, I think, Vicky, not always, no, because I grew up, obviously, my father being a trainer, I grew up in the stable yard, and I obviously grew up riding. So, I mean, my whole life was really horses. I love riding, love horses. I enjoyed all of that. I used to ride work a lot too. But actually, after school, I actually worked for what was Cape Racing then, or whatever it was called. I worked there for a couple of months after school, and then I ended up going to work for an interior decorating company for about 2 years or so. And then I went into sales after that. I worked for Walton's as a sales rep for 3.5 years, and then at Xerox for another 3.5 years. So I spent quite a bit of time out of the yard, just basically going back and riding work in between. And then I think the business at that stage was not big enough to, you know, have me working there on a full-time basis, you know, and having been able to earn the money that, you know, I was earning. So at a point where the stable yard got big enough, and my father then asked me please to come back, he needed an extra person there, and the business was able to carry me, so I gave up doing what I was doing and then started obviously working with him. And yeah, from there on, you know, I've been there for quite some time before I actually took out my license on my own, which was actually when he got sick, and I was forced to take it out fairly quickly. So yeah, I can't say I was always going to train horses, but you know, as I've always been involved. I was always at the races or riding work or being involved in the yard. So I've pretty much grown up with it, and I think it's in my blood, really.
Do you feel that you were ready at that point? Because with your father feeling ill, it was almost a bit of a premature push into that position.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Vicky, as I said, I'd been there for quite a long time. So, you know, and he would go to Durban for 4 months of the year, and, you know, I'd be left down here. So I didn't ever feel like I was really thrown in the deep end, but obviously you are I was pretty much thrown in there, and it was like do or die, really. And it was sort of the time going into the season. It was around about August or so when it happened, so we were going into the Cape season. So it was a little bit daunting, but as I said, I was very much equipped and ready to take over.
What were some of the challenges that you found in those first months or in that first season?
Oh, now you're asking me to go back and remember. That's not so easy. I kind of think it's just about trusting your own intuition and your own decisions, whereas when you have somebody else there, like my father, to bounce ideas off and to be reliant on, whereas at that point he wasn't there at all, because, you know, he was in a coma, and I wasn't able to even ask anything, so I had to just be forced to make my own decisions. And I think maybe that wasn't really a bad thing, because it actually forces you to stand on your own 2 feet and make decisions, whereas before you were completely reliant on somebody else saying, yes, it's a good idea, or no, it's not a good idea. So I don't think there were too many challenges as such. You know, I started my year off with a bang pretty much, so I think it all went well. And as I say, I obviously having my father, who was, you know, for me, a phenomenal horseman and a great trainer, I had a very sound, you know, sort of education, if you want to put it that way, into being able to be a trainer.
And also, your father's got an unbelievable work ethic. He never missed a sale, didn't miss an event. He was completely involved in all the aspects. Do you think that you learned that part of your work ethic from him?
Yeah, he very much so, Vicky, and he's still like that. He still comes to work every single day, whereas he doesn't have to, but he does. And you know, it's quite something to have you know, because it's not an easy. It's takes up a lot of your time, and it's not like, you know, you go home on a Friday and you've got a weekend to yourself. It's racing on Saturday. It's constantly being, you know, involved in your work. And I think to be, you know, to have a really good work ethic like that is not easy in an industry like this, and it takes some doing, I think. And for me, it's a little bit different, because I'm obviously being a female and being a mother, I've got a son and things like that, and I sometimes feel like I need to devote a little bit of my time or give a little bit of my time there, because it's difficult. That's the one difficult thing about, you know, being a female and being a mother, and trying to find the time to balance the time between the two, because, you know, it's most weekends that you're just not there really, and it's whenever there's Mother's Day, then there's something on, or there's sales, or, you know, and they kind of get left a little bit in the wake.
I think that's what it comes down to, is also having, as you've touched on, the capacity to manage a household, a family, and then still, you know, have the space for your work that is a little bit more encroaching than maybe a traditional workspace. Are you finding a bit of a balance, or is it just a bit of a juggling act, sort of in certain occasions?
I guess you do find some sort of a balance. Whether it's the right balance or not is always difficult to say, because, you know, someone ends up suffering a little bit along the way. You know, whether you like it or not, it is that way, and unfortunately there's not much you can do to change that, because, you know, you move, you think, oh well, you're just done with a season here, but then it rolls from one thing to the next, then it's sales, and there's always something going on. So it very much consumes your life. It's not just a normal job that you go to 9 to 5 and you're home on the weekend and start again on Monday. It consumes your life, and that's the one little difficult part that I find. But other than that, I guess, you know, your time is a little bit of your own. You know, you're not trapped in an office from 9 to 5, and, you know, you get out quite a bit and things like that. And I enjoy my job, so that I think makes a difference too.
With your team, because your operation has a great team behind you, do you think that support structure is such a benefit, because not only is it advice, but also just helping you in areas where you can't be all the time?
Definitely so. You know, we've got quite a big yard, and without my staff, you know, the backing of my staff, I don't think, you know, all of that would be possible. And obviously I've got really great staff members with a lot of expertise, and a lot of, most of them have been there for a very long time. So, you know, we all understand each other's ways of working, and, you know, if one can't be there, there's always somebody else to fill in. So it definitely does make a difference, yes.
As you've mentioned, you've been in the industry for so long in many different aspects and roles. But in your training career, because initially when you took over, it was your father's string inherently, and then you had to go to sales and then start looking at horses. Do you and your father have the same taste in horses?
I think so, Vicky. We pretty much are able to pick out the same type of horse, and I think maybe that's from spending all the time together at the sales and learning. And I mean, I pick up his eye, and you get to like the same type of horses. So yeah, I would say that we have pretty similar taste. I think that's one area that he was extremely good at. He's got an amazing eye for looking at horses and for looking at yearlings, and he's been a great teacher for me to walk around with over all the years. And you know, I think Mark, who's come into the business, you know, much later than what, and from a non-horsey background, he doesn't ride at all. He, from walking around with us as well, has also picked up on those same things, and in a short space of time. So yeah, I think if you're with somebody all the time, you get to learn, you know, what they look for and what they like, and it definitely rubs off on you, or you end up having the same sort of taste, yes.
You said you enjoy your job. What parts that do you really thoroughly enjoy?
Obviously I love horses, and I love dealing with horses. There are lots of challenging parts in my job, I will say that. But I think it's obviously working with the horses, and I wouldn't only say the success of your job, but it's trying to work through problems, and you know, when things come together, and I think all those moments that make your job so satisfying. That for me is probably the most part of what I enjoy of my job. You know, especially when you have horses that come in from young horses, and you see their career, especially the decent ones that I've had, blossom like that. And you know, often the people that I work with, it's nice to see them also, you know, doing well and moving up the ranks and starting out from the bottom. I think all those things are very satisfying things for me.
Everyone has a different personality, and obviously you can see that through racing and through the trainers' ranks. But you're very different in the way that your personality doesn't scream a competitive person. But if I look at you and how you take on your job, you are very competitive.
I am very competitive. I'm not a very loud, outwardly spoken person. I'm quite a shy, reserved person, and I think some people take that in a They take that in a different way. You know, they think I'm maybe a little bit aloof and maybe unfriendly, if you want to call it that, but I'm actually not, and I am quite a reserved, shy person, and so I probably don't show it in an outward way, but I've got a very competitive nature. I was always good at sports at school and always had that competitive side of my nature to me, and I think I've carried that through in most things that I do. But I do it in a quiet way. But yes, I've got a very competitive nature.
What are some of the highlights of your career that you can just remember and think that was like in the moment, and now looking back, that you really just think that was it for me?
I suppose there's quite a lot of moments, Vicky. Obviously, you know, they're from very little, small moments that probably don't mean anything to anybody, things that have come together, which have taken a lot of work and things to come off, and obviously all my really big wins and a lot of my special horses that, you know, they might not have won special races, but they've been as special horses to me, and you know, I've seen them through their career where they've ended up winning however many races. But obviously, you know, things like the Guineas and Queen's Plates and Julys and things like that, winning those have been momentous moments for me. You know, I think it's everybody's dream to win those races, and it's not always the easiest, and I'm fortunate enough to being able to have the horses to being able to do that with. And you know, it's all very well having the horses, but you've still got to do it at the end of the day, and that comes with a lot of pressure, and at the same time it comes with a lot of satisfaction and a lot of relief too.
Because it's when you get the good ones, it's how you program them to maximize that talent. Is that something that you find joy in, finding those routes and working those patterns out?
I do, Vicky, and it's, as I say, it can be a very stressful thing because, you know, there's always all eyes on you and people are expectant, and you know you've got all the talent, and at the end of the day you're dealing with an animal. It's not so easy to just push buttons and say, well, you know, they've got all this talent, things go wrong, there's soundness issues, there are other issues, you know, and everything basically needs to work out in races, bad draws, you know, maybe you didn't prep them as well as what you should have prepped them, and all those factors go into it. So it carries a lot of weight, and I think which in turn makes it very satisfying when you do manage to pull it off and you manage to take them through a career where you believe you've got the best out of them.
How do you celebrate those moments and those really big wins?
I think it's more of a relief for me than anything else, besides the fact that, and I think, I suppose we kind of, and I think that's one thing that we are guilty of, well, I certainly am sometimes, is I don't think we celebrate it enough. You know, it's all in the moment, and obviously it's a busy day and everyone's exhausted and tired and whatever, and all the stress that's gone with it, so that you have a small bit of celebrations after a race, but you never actually take the time to enjoy that moment. We're straight back to work on Monday morning and we're back into another thing, and we never actually get time to enjoy those things, and we just move on from one thing to the next. And I think that is something that I'm a little bit guilty of, and I would like to, you know, try to change that a little bit, where actually you do savor the moments. And I often don't look back. You think, oh, the year that you've had or the season, and you know, Kira from Drakenstein actually is always one that says to me, have you actually sat down and looked back and, you know, taken in what you've done this season? And the answer is really no, because as I say, you just move on from one thing to the next, so you don't actually sit down and think, oh wow, this is what I've achieved this year. So it would be nice to try and savor a little bit more than what I actually do.
Almost pause the clock and then just revel in the
clock
success.
Doesn't pause there. Everything just goes on at 100 miles an hour. But yeah, as I say, it's nice sometimes to maybe just sit back and relish a little bit in what you have done.
This is an experience that you and your father both share, is horses in your care under your training umbrella that have left for international careers and success. Is that an exciting part that you're looking forward to now, especially with Beach Bomb?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously nice, Vicky, to see them compete abroad. You know, it's a little bit of a catch-22 because, you know, they've obviously left the yard, and, you know, it leaves a bit of a space behind here, and, you know, you grow attached to horses, and, you know, once they're gone and they're moving on elsewhere, then you just like lose touch with them a little bit. But, you know, in her case, she's actually running on the weekend now, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how she goes, and obviously she'll be running on Breeders' Cup Day, and we are very fortunate enough to be able to go over and watch her. So yeah, it's lovely to be able to follow them on and to know that they are, you know, good enough, and you've taken them to that point where they can compete on the international stage and hopefully be good enough.
Maman June on the outside is unleashed. She went a little wide coming off the turn, but is producing a powerful late kick. Here comes Maman June sweeping to the front with a nice acceleration. And here's America's newest stakes winner. It's Maman June to win the Violet Stakes by 2 for the Chad Brown Bard. Beach Bomb completing the exact.
It would be unfair not to have the Charles Dickens chapter as part of my conversation with you. When he first came into the yard, well, when you first laid eyes on Charles, what were your thoughts?
I actually went to see him on the farm before he came in. Obviously, he was quite woolly and what have you then, but he was always a nice-looking horse. And he came into the yard and he kind of just fitted in with everybody else. And, you know, that takes me a little bit of time to just get them into a routine and to get them going. And, you know, I don't really pay a huge amount of attention to them or focus on them at that stage. You know, I just basically go through their normal regime just to try and get them up to fitness levels, or when they are ready to start showing that they're, you know, ready to start racing. And with him, it was, in the beginning, he was just doing his thing. I didn't really take too much notice of, oh wow, this is he was a standout, because he wasn't really in the ring. In the mornings, he was just one of the others going around. But once he started getting closer to the point where he was ready to start running, and I think it was pretty much the first time I took him to gallop at Durbanville, I just chucked him into gallops, and I've had a couple of horses, and in fact Silver Mountain was one of those horses. She was nothing to look at. But the first time I took her to gallop at Durbanville, she just, and it's not who they beat or what they do, it's how they do it. And you just know from that day that there's definitely something here that's a little bit more special than what everyone else has. And then obviously getting feedback from the riders, once he was at this point where he was stronger, then they would start coming back and say, oh, wow, you know, this horse really feels amazing, and goosebumps and all these kinds of things. And then you start getting excited about a horse, and obviously prepping him for his first run. We thought he would win first time out, albeit just. But yeah, from then on, obviously, you know, Aldo always used to come back and say that, you know, he had this amazing turn of foot, and when you asked, it was that, and then there was just another jet fuel behind you that there was just more on top of that. And he wasn't always the easiest horse to train. You know, he had his little quirks and things. He wasn't very easy as far as his head carriage and his mouth was going, and he was a little bit strong. So he was a tricky horse to ride and to try and manage in that sense. However, he had the most amazing temperament for a colt. He had a wonderful temperament, and he just took everything in his stride. He was a sound horse. He never gave a day's problem. He never left an oat. He was just one of those horses, always looked well, always worked well. So, yeah, he was a very special horse for me to train.
I remember him as being a showman, because it's similar. I saw him in the yard when he was already in gear and into his career. But if you saw him in the ring, you knew that he was special just because he had a little bit of pride. But when he steps on that course, an absolute showman, the bigger the crowd, and you could see it in him. It was incredible.
He used to love to stop and stare and look at everything. And he would do that at home. And I think, yeah, he was a little bit spoilt at home, but he was just that kind of horse. He wasn't just a horse. He was, I can't even explain to you, he wasn't just another horse. He had his own, he's got a weird kind of, you know, he would go work in the morning, and then he'd walk home, and obviously the whole of Milnerton knew him. They would all stop and feed him grass, and, you know, he would visit this one along the way and that one along the way, and then he would stop and stare at this and stare at that, and, you know, a loose horse could come running past him, and he would just stop and turn and look at it. And he just had this, like, way about him that was, and then when he came back to the stables, you know, he was quite cheeky in his box. He liked to bite and give you cuddles every now and then when you wanted to, but he was just a different kind of horse. He wasn't just your regular horse. He had a personality or a character to him that was just different to everybody else. Yeah, obviously the Guineas, I think, was possibly my favourite win of his for many reasons, and just the way he did it. And, you know, up until that time we knew how good he was, but you didn't even know exactly how good he was, and I think that put everything to bed, really. And I think probably a close second to that was his win in the Gold Challenge. I thought that was a really awesome win. But, you know, all his wins are like that. You just watch him, he's got that devastating turn of foot, and just the way he turns it on and he just sort of leaves everyone behind him, it's awesome to watch.
Was it even different to some of the greats like Pocket Power?
Pocket Power was different to him. They're a different kind of horse. Pocket Power was a little bit more, he wasn't always the friendliest of horses. Pocket Power was a little bit more you know, he wanted to bite you over the door and that sort of thing. But and he was a little bit, he was spook at things, and he was a funny horse. He was always looking at everything, and but he, on the other hand, when he went to do his work, I mean, his mind was focused, and he was a brilliant horse as well in a different sense. He maybe didn't have the acceleration and the brilliance that Charles had, but he was unbelievably good horse. He was a champion, and I mean the longevity that he had. You know, for all those years, winning 4 Queen's Plates in a row and 3 Mets in a row, year after year after year. I mean, that takes something for a horse to do that.
Power and Dancer's daughter, pocket power, Dancer's daughter, pocket power, Dancer's daughter, pocket power.
He was a little bit more quirky than what Charles was, but I think all the good horses have got some little bit of quirkiness about them. Otherwise, you know, they wouldn't be what they are, I don't think.
With Charles, that must have been quite a... Was he difficult to program in that you knew what you had, but it was that, you know, as he sort of went on, it seemed like it was more challenging to positively bottle that in and position it correctly?
I don't think so too much. I mean, he was we kind of had a program for him, and we knew what his route was going to be. The only thing with him was there was always a question mark about does he stay or does he not stay. So it would always be, do we try the 2,000 meters, do we not? And initially when we tried the Derby distance and he came up against See It Again, you know, it was a little bit of a push maybe to go over 2,000 meters at that stage of his career. I think as an older horse the following year, I think he probably would have done the 2,000 meters. So those were the main concerns. And then, you know, obviously you've got all your obvious races that he would run in, and then the same when he went to Durban, you know, he ran in the 2-mile races, and then we left him out of the 1800. And I think probably, as I say, as a 4-year-old, he probably would have done those distances pretty comfortably.
The Lomara King's Plate, winning that, you got to, I know that you said it all goes by so quickly, but talk us through a little bit about probably the week leading up to the race.
Oh. The pressure of that race, because obviously the year previously to that, we actually thought he would obviously have a really good chance of winning, and we were all a bit disappointed that he got beaten that year. And I think the pressure going into this Queen's Plate was probably way more than what that one was, because this was his year to win it. And you know, obviously I thought he had an outstanding chance of winning it, but you still got to put it together and you still got to do it. And as I say, he doesn't always make it easy for you, but you know, and often sometimes you can't really always just position him in a race where you want to position him. You know, he's a little bit tricky.
There were a few unconventional things. I remember you did a mock-up barrier trial for him, just to try and get, you know, almost a bit of pickup work for him.
Yeah.
Did you have to go through these different lengths for him?
Well, it was just trying to get him to, sometimes, I think doing a mock-up race is sometimes when there's not really enough prep runs for them, then I try to put together a race for them so that, you know, just taking him to gallop by himself with someone else is not really enough work for him, because he, you know, he would just do it so comfortably. And I think that was with him, you know, he would move up past a horse so comfortably, and then, you know, what it's like with most horses, once they get past, they just kind of, you know, they comfortably just let themselves down a little bit. And I think, you know, he needed to have a proper hard gallop sometimes when for me to get him ready, and to try and keep him properly fit, because he would just get through his work so easily at home. You know, getting through the sand and his work at home really was nothing for him. And you were always a little concerned that, you know, had he done enough, because, as I say, he does it so easily that wasn't maybe enough for him just at home. So making a mock race and things like that for him, and also just trying to get him to settle nicely, sit behind horses, and to get him to settle properly. And then, you know, that's when his turn of foot was at his best, when he switched off properly in a race, and then, you know, you pulled him out, and it was just that. It was wow to watch, and I think that's how it was in the Guineas actually, and in the Queen's Plate when he won this last year. That's how he was probably at his best, and I think the Gold Challenge, those were probably his 3 best wins.
It's interesting because those are also the 3 races where I think Gaynor Rupert enjoyed him the most, and you could always tell by her feedback. I remember interviewing her, and she was like, "This is my best moment in racing," and I remember looking at it and thinking, this woman's been on the stage so many times. Yeah. What makes this, but listening to you, do you think Charles made it that special?
I think so, Vicky. You know, he was, obviously Gaynor had bred him, you know, she bred him and raced him, and, you know, he's achieved all these things, and, you know, being able to win, obviously, a Guineas, which was the first race for us to win, the Queen's Plate, which is her own race day and race that she sponsors. I think those are all special moments, and I think he just made it that more special because of the kind of horse that he was. He really did, and I think, you know, for me too, there were a lot of emotional moments with him, especially winning those moments when he did win that you find it very hard to hold back the tears, and I think it was the same for Gaynor, and especially standing there listening to her saying things like that, because she's, you know, she's got lots of horses, and I mean, she's, you know, won most of these races, but to listen to her speak about him, I think was just a little bit different. And I think it's, you know, to know that a horse like that can bring you the greatest pleasure or give you the best day of your life is a very big statement to make.
Charles Dickens, and I have to really try and hold it together here. He's a great horse, and we know he's a great horse. Couple of things went wrong here and there, but today he showed who he really is, and he's the future of Drakenstein. Trippy that I love so much, now I've got Charles, and when I came here today I thought I'm not going to think of anything to say because I have to prepare myself for possible defeat. Last year I thought I'm going to win, but it doesn't always work out like that in racing, which is what makes it so exciting and wonderful, because everything has to go right. Today it did, and he could show what he's about. And I know we had, if I have to quote Charles Dickens, a spring of hope, but we did have the worst of times, and now we have the best of times. And this is a great day for me. First time in 20 years that I've been sponsoring this race, and finally I've won it. my whole family is here. My husband, my 3 children, all their spouses. I couldn't be happier.
When you won the Guineas, you said it was the best racing moment of your life. Does this top that?
Yes, it does. It just tops it.
Look, that standard's very high. But going forward, you'll never have another Charles. But who do you have, and what are you looking forward to with your new season or the new season?
Yeah, look, I don't have another Charles at the moment, but I mean, that's not going to come around. Always looking for another one. Maybe when his babies come through, we'll find one. But I've got a nice string of horses, Vicky. You know, I always have a lot of nice fillies. I'm never short of fillies, and I've always got some decent ones. Obviously, I've got a filly like October Morn that won the Group 1 in Scottsville now. She'll be, you know, my flag bearer for the older fillies sprinting races, and then I've got a horse like Future Variety, who's an up-and-coming young horse. I think who's a very, very talented sprinting type, especially a nice horse to have like that for a big group of owners for the Centenary Syndicate. I think that makes it a little bit more exciting for everybody. And then as far as, look, I've obviously lost quite a few of my older horses now, so I'm a little bit lean when it comes to that side of things. I've got some nice 3-year-olds, a lot of nice, some of them that haven't actually even properly been out yet due to the fact that we haven't had racing and things like that, so it's been a little bit frustrating. So they've still got a little bit to prove of themselves. I know that I've got a really nice batch of them, but I think that they've got to step up to the plate now, and a couple of them are a little bit behind in their programs. What else have I got?
Is Sugar Mountain ever going
I was
to
just
retire?
going to say, Sugar Mountain, no, not for now. He's one of my favorite horses in the yard. He's just the best horse you will ever find. He's got the most awesome temperament. He's as honest as the day is long. You know, I've travelled him once or twice now, which hasn't been very successful for him, so I think he's going to stay put in Cape Town. I'll probably run him in the Matcham Stakes, bring him out in the Matcham Stakes again now and see how we go. But he's just such an honest horse, and he's a sound, happy horse, and until such time as, you know, I feel like he's not, you know, living up to his ability, then I will find the best home for him, that's for sure.
I think you'll dabble in him being a lead pony
some
first.
little girl very happy, oh yeah. A lead pony if I don't want him to go. So yeah, I've got a very nice mixed bunch of horses. As I say, I've got a lot of nice younger horses, but they do need to still step up to the plate, and we'll have to just see how they go. Filly like Symphony and White and things, those types of fillies are Rockapina. She's obviously only just won her maiden, but they're all showing a lot at home, so we'll just have to see how we go going forward into the season.
Your job entails a lot because, you know, as a trainer in South Africa, you need to be everything. A business owner, runner, you need to conduct all of those sort of things. You need to be a blunt stock agent. Which aspects, sales-wise, do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy the training? The obviously high-level successes, that's a given. But which aspects do you really thrive in?
I think I enjoy, Vicky, I enjoy training the horses. That's probably my first love. I enjoy that the most. I love going to sales. I love looking at horses. I love choosing horses. Not always easy to buy the ones that you want. You know, it's become very tricky at the sales. It's become fairly pricey. So, and we're all sort of after the same kind of horses in that price bracket. So it makes it a little bit difficult to, you know, kind of step out and buy the horses that you want to buy. Obviously being a racehorse trainer doesn't just stop at training racehorses. I think like they do in most other countries where the trainer trains the racehorses and then you've got a marketing division for all those things and you've got a bloodstock agent for sales. We kind of do everything at Bass Racing, and you know, obviously Mark is there for that side of things, and that's a little bit difficult for me, but sometimes, you know, as a female I would think it's not always the easiest. You know, you've got a lot of male clients and they enjoy being social and going to, you know, spending time out with their men trainers or the boys kind of thing, whereas that's not really me. So I have to try and make up for that in other ways. Thankfully I've got Marky for that, so it helps. But yeah, from going to, I really do enjoy going to the sales, and I enjoy choosing horses and buying horses. So that probably, and you know, training them, those are my two, I would think, favorite parts of my job.
You've really come into your own in the last few years. Do you think that that's benefited your business, or your business has influenced that part of it?
I suppose you could say it has benefited my business, but I guess you kind of grow within the business. So, you know, what I have has helped me to grow to where I am, and you know, we've got a nice big yard of horses now. You know, there were times where we had a few less, and it's grown up again now. And you know, Marky's come up with some nice new, you know, initiatives and making up syndicates and things like that, which has helped to boost everything, I think. And that definitely helps me to grow. And I don't think you ever stop learning in this industry. You can never learn enough. And yeah, I think obviously the more you train and the more experience you get, the more you know, you kind of figure out what you can change and what you can better. And yeah, as I say, I've been around for quite a long time now, and you know, I feel like I've got a very good understanding of horses, growing up with them, and having ridden myself, I do have a good understanding of what it entails. Sometimes maybe my only downfall is I can be a little bit soft. I think my empathetic side can take over a little bit. And every now and then I just have to pull myself right and say, listen, that's what's nice about having my father there. He's, you know, like, hey, you know, you need to do more here. You're not doing enough, kind of thing. And, you know, to have that balance certainly does help. But it's a very difficult job. As I say, you're dealing with animals, you're dealing with all kinds of external factors. It doesn't just, and just when you think things are going great one way, then, oops, it makes a turn the other way. So it's, and you know, you have to try to just keep yourself, often when things are not going great, and I think we, as trainers, we all go through this, where you go down, where you have dips, and then you start thinking and panicking and wanting to change things and doing all things. I think the secret there is to not do that. Just continue with what you're doing, and eventually things, you know, start falling back into place. Or, you know, horses get high merit ratings after they've won, and then they sit in a place where they're not competitive for a while, until such time as they've, you know, can drop back down again and be competitive again. And I think all horses have got a certain amount of wins in their career, be it 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever their ability is, and how they get it, whether they get it all early on, or you know, they sit with a lull in between and then they, you know, carry on after that. I think they're all different in that aspect. So I think sometimes your mind, you need to just like sit yourself down and say, listen, no, don't need to panic, things will come right, and they do.
In your position, there's always a lot of judgment, and people always believe they know better than you. So how do you manage that or handle that?
Vicky, you can't let that get to you, because there are a lot of opinions, and sometimes opinions from people who don't really know or don't really have a proper understanding of things, and everybody likes to give advice and everybody likes to do that. And you know, sometimes you can pull and take from what you need to take or what you think is important, and other times you have to just not allow yourself to rise to the bait and not allow yourself to get affected by that. And in this industry, I think it's very difficult to not allow yourself to get affected by all sorts of things, because people do talk, and they talk a lot. And, you know, not all people like to see other people successful, and, you know, all those things go into it. And I always find that so strange, because, you know, I always like to see other people doing well. It's nice to see other people doing well. We're all in this together, and we're all under as much pressure as everybody else. And it's nice to see when other people do well. It's nice to see when they're champion horses around or they're good horses. Everybody, you know, it's nice to have a following of those things. But as I say, I guess we're all human, and it's the type of industry that we're in is a very competitive one, and yeah, you do open yourself up to that, and it's just a matter of trying to just filter all of that.
What are you most looking forward to coming up for the season or in your career?
Obviously, you know, I try to set myself goals for every season, and, you know, to say that I would like to win so many grade ones for the season. I think last year I had a particularly good season as far as that was concerned. Perhaps not as many winners as I would like to have had, like we had the previous year. So I think this year I would like to try and better that a little bit, trying to pick up my number of winners for the year. My percentages the last 2 years have been, you know, quite a lot better than what they have been. They've actually been very good for the last 2 years, so I've been happy with that. So if I can get a combination of all those things together, and obviously I would like to try and move up a little bit on the trainer's log if I can. I've got to beat that damn Justin at some stage. So I'd like to try and do that. It's one of my goals along the way, and I think I was sitting quite close to that this last year. Unfortunately, obviously, having lost my two better horses kind of put a little bit of a damper on that for me. But, you know, you kind of move on, and let's hope that I can get there at some stage.
Raiding different provinces, you do it quite frequently and a little bit different to most. You know, you actually send them up and bring them back. Do you think that you found a way of doing that that's been quite successful?
Vicky, it has been successful for me, and I think that would be the ideal way to do it, especially going to Natal and things. Obviously, PE raiding back and forth is easy because it's in and out and it's not a long trip. It's a little bit more tricky when you're going to Natal. For me, you know, I haven't had a huge string going up, so it's difficult for me. I mean, I can't go up there and stay there the whole season and leave my whole yard down here for 3 horses. So it's worked out pretty well for me to be able to raid. You know, I send them up 2 weeks before, and you know, I've been fortunate enough to have, a couple of years back, I've had Trevor Brown up there to help me, and this year I had Terry Fripp, so that does help me. But as I say, it's worked out well, and it works out well if you're not there for the whole season. So the fillies that I took up had one specific race that they were targeted for, and there wasn't anything else for them for the season, so they could come back home again. It was just Red Palace, I think, that I took up. She had that run in the mile, which was a little bit short for her, and then she stayed on, obviously, the 3 weeks to run, and she won on Gold Cup Day. So it did work out pretty well for me. I don't know if I could do that if I was taking up a whole big string for the season, you know, and someone like Charles and those horses that ran in like 3 races or so for the season, then it's a little bit different. But I think it's easy on them. It's tricky taking horses up to Summerveld. It's a lot different to what our tracks are at home. You know, horses get quite keen up there. The tracks are very open. There's no long round work like we used to having at home, and I find the horses get a little bit keen and a little bit they want to get on with their work up there. So the less time I can spend there with them, the better it is for me, I believe. But you know, you got to hope that they travel up well. If that's the chance you take. If they don't travel up well, that's the end of that. But so far, it's been pretty good. I mean. You two have been great taking my horses up and down. They really have been, you know, a super help to me, because, you know, my horses have travelled up well. You know, they stop along the way. They've got extra spaces on the truck, so it helps them to travel well. And, you know, they've been really accommodating. So all of those things together do help, yes.
October Morn, she's not, you know, she's a filly that was exceptional with her win up there. Do you think that you caught them a little bit unaware?
It was always difficult between the two filly. I mean, I obviously took up the 2. You know, she was slowly but surely making her way down here. I mean, I think people kind of didn't really pay too much attention to her. You know, she'd just come off a win in the Scepter Stakes, and she ran second in the 1400 on Derby Day. She's always been a very good filly. She's been a little unlucky on 1 or 2 occasions, and I've really actually enjoyed her prep and her season and her prep to Durban. And you know, David Avery obviously owns her, and he made it really interesting for me actually, because he was very interested obviously in how I was doing things, and he was a bit worried about things, and he would phone me and speak for hours on the phone, and I'd say to him, David, don't worry, I've got everything under control. And when I put down the phone, I'd think, have I got everything under control? I'm speaking here like I know what the result's going to be. And it just panned out to be such a good story, because the conversations that we'd had leading up to this race, and it was just like, you know, for him on the other side, it was just like, oh, well, this is what it is. So we've planned this is work, this is that. We're going there, we're going to win a Group 1, and we're coming home. And it was like, it all worked out so well. But it was such a nice journey to take with him, with the long conversations, and he was worried about this and that. And I'm saying, don't worry, everything's fine, everything's under control. So that for me was actually quite a special win, because, as I say, the journey that we went through to get there, that was really a plan come together. From the beginning of the season, David was always, you have to win a Group 1 with this filly. I said, don't worry, I'll win a Group 1 with this filly. I'm thinking, okay, I only got one chance at one Group 1 with her, and which was that race, and it all worked out quite well. Unfortunately, the other filly, it didn't really work out with her. She ended up racing next to that loose horse the whole way, so that was a bit of a downer. But yeah, it was a good story, and she'll be back now for the season, and I'll be heading towards the Cape Flying, which is another Group 1.
Interesting, talking about interesting horses. Do you think Trip of Fortune would fall into that category, where very talented, but he had an interesting career? Yeah,
Vicky was never a brilliant horse. He was not a Charles Dickens or a Pocket Power but he was probably more of a workman-like type of horse, and he obviously had a lot of ability. He had ability, but not. I think it was more a case of what we managed to get out of him. I think we probably got more out of him than his actual ability as such. You know, he was a good horse, and things worked out very well for him. And obviously, you know, he managed to win graded races in all 3 centres, which takes some doing, and he had some travelling. I mean, he raced the season here in Cape Town, then he went up to Joburg, won the Group 1 in Joburg and the Horse Chestnut Stakes, and then on to Durban, where he won the Drill all after that. So he took it like a soldier, and you know, as I said, it's not easy to do that. To 3 seasons in one year in different centres is a very difficult thing to do. So I take my hat off to him, and he was, as I say, he was a proper soldier of a horse, and he was you know, that I think that year when he ran in the Guineas, when he almost went over the fence, I think that was also a great disappointment for everybody, because we always thought, oh, well, he was a very nice up-and-coming horse, and it was a chance that I had at maybe having a crack at the Guineas that year, and, you know, things all went wrong, but he made up for it along the way.
He most certainly did. And the other thing is, we're looking at What a Winter's a horse I think I need to mention, because he himself was such a gentleman. And this is a similar journey. You almost had somewhat of the journey that you're going to have with Charles, in that you have What a Winter's progeny in your yard. Is that special for you?
It's very special, Vicky, and you know, it's obviously having that horse in the yard and training that horse, and you know them so well. I think training their progeny, I mean, I see a lot of What a Winter in all these babies, and, you know, a lot of similarities, and I enjoy training them, because, you know, you've had all that with him before, and I think it will be the same story with Charles. Having had him in my yard and trained him and gone through all those things, and picking up all the similarities in the progeny that come through, I think make it a little bit more special than just having a, you know, a Dynasty or a Vercingetorix that, sure, they're lovely horses, but they were not a part of my legacy, if you could call it that. It's a big word to use, eh? But yeah, one day maybe. But yeah, so it definitely does make it a bit more special, and I can't wait to get baby Charleses in my yard. I'd love to see how they turn out, and, you know, how they, hopefully a lot of them can emulate his great characteristics that he had.
Candice. We look forward to a lot. The baby Charleses, and not only that, the season ahead for you. So all
Actually
the
got
best.
a baby. Talking of baby Charleses, I've got baby Cloud's first baby, Cloud's Unfold, because she was also one of my favorite fillies. She was a very special filly to me. Also in a sense of, I don't know, she just had an air about her, and we had a connection, the two of us, like nobody else could understand one another. She and I understood one another, and she was one of those horses, and she now getting her first foal coming into the yard now as a 2-year-old. I'm looking forward to that, because it'll be nice to see where she fits into that. So it's nice to go through all those generations. And filly like Nightingale, she was my first Grade 1 winner, and I've had 2 of her babies come in, and obviously Rainbow Lorikeet being one of them. It just makes it a little bit more special.
Well, it's nice to know you have those personal connections. I think it's so important, because otherwise then, you know, it's just sort of copy and paste for the next horse.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, there are always a lot of similarities, and you know that worked with her, and often they carry that down, and, you know, okay, this is where we're heading to with them as well. So, yeah, it makes it more fun.
It does indeed. Candice, we wish you all the best and all the success for your season coming up.
Thank you, Vicky.
And thank you to all of you for joining us. We've got lots to look forward to. Baby Charles, Baby Clouds. It's going to be, but that's for the future. But stay tuned for Bass Racing. Lots of exciting things, and thank you for joining us.